Thank you, Bunty, for that great introduction and setting of the scene. I also want to thank you and your amazing team for bringing us all together this evening. It's going to be a thoroughly interesting evening and conversation. I was introduced to Bunty in January via the Asia Society in Hong Kong, with whom we've worked on a number of occasions, talking about this identical theme a few months ago. Great conversation, we learnt a lot, and we put that back into our research. So I'm really delighted that we've been able to make this conversation a reality here in Mumbai. What I'm going to do is, let me tell you how we're proposing to run the evening. A couple of comments regarding 13D and why we were involved in this theme and why we're passionate about it, and also the context as we introduce the panelists and their contributions. So you've heard who our esteemed panel are. I'm going to ask each of them to speak, give a brief overview of their response to this title, Co-Creating Gender Equality, whether they're basing it on their personal experiences, their work, or their research. We're going to get their thoughts on that. I'm going to ask them a few questions, and then we're going to open up the Q&A to the audience. Now, Bunty has told me people in Mumbai are not shy, so I know it's going to be a lively debate. Please be open. There are no limitations around the conversation. We really want to hear what you're thinking, and in particular what's working and what's not working. This is a dialogue and not a monologue. So let me just very briefly tell you about 13D. Our full name is 13D Global Strategy and Research. Who are we and why this theme? We're an independent research company. 35 years of researching and writing about, from a top-down view, on all of the themes that are shaping the world today. Whether we're talking about how the markets are performing, or whether we're talking about energy, or some of the more topical themes, artificial intelligence, 5G, the anti-tech backlash, a whole array, anything that's shaping the world. And including societal themes, things around demographic change, the rise of China, the rise of India, and its performance. We have 10 researchers based in Delhi. We've always been a part of the community and the fabric of life here. We're all based globally all over the world. Our perspective is different. We call ourselves contrarians. What you read with 13D, you will not read anywhere else. We look at the lessons of history and the patterns to predict the future outcomes. And our clients range from organizations, corporates, to the financial services sector, large global asset management companies, smaller asset management companies, family offices, private investors. The common thread amongst our clients is they want to know what's going to happen next because they're going to invest. So that's why they work with us. So this is a segue into today's theme. In 2017, when the Me Too movement was in the headlines, our chairman said, this is going to be big, this is not going to go away, this is going to create change, and it's going to have global implications. And he was right. So we started focusing on what our clients would need. Gender pay gap, hiring more women. Should there be quotas? Were there women in leadership? What were their roles? And all of the things that were being put under the spotlight across the globe in relation to women. We also looked at the political implications. In the US, at the time of the midterm elections, there was an unprecedented 300 women looking to take seats in Congress. Imagine if they had all got in. what a difference that would have made to legislation going through Congress or political opinion. In fact, 90 of them secured seats, which was an incredibly high number. The other area we looked at was the increase in wealth predictions for women. So a lot of men hate it when I say this. We live longer. So we normally end up with the family wealth. And with the exponential rise of career women, we're seeing a lot of change. And wealthy women invest differently. They invest in welfare, they invest in education, they will invest in sustainability and environmental causes. So we wanted to point out to our clients that there could be some changes in the investment landscape. And we saw a rise of impact investment funds. Then we narrowed the lens and we looked at organizations. And were there financial benefits from organizations that had better male-female ratios than those that didn't? And were there other benefits? So that sort of brings us to today's conversation. Can we make a case so compelling and lasting that change is accelerated, that it goes beyond lip service? And can we learn what's working and what's not working? So, Ravinder, without further delay, let's hear your opinion.
Thank you very much, Monica. I'm very happy to be here, and thanks to 13D and Asia Society for inviting me to take part in this very important conversation. Let me begin by talking about my own space of academia, especially the IITs, which are highly male-dominated, as you would know. Overall, I mean, the IITs started in the 1960s, the older ones, and up to date, we don't have a single female director. The IIMs got their first female director, and one of the new ones very recently. Jamia Millia University got their first female vice chancellor of any university in the capital city, Delhi. So I think that tells us a little bit about where the power lies and where the power structures are extremely strong. So some women are breaching the ceiling, the glass ceiling, but not a lot. Academia is generally considered to be, lots of women there. But if I look at my own institution, there are very few women who are deans or in positions of responsibility. I don't know if you would know this, but IITs have a very small percentage of female students at the BTech level, just 8 to 10%, and that number has risen to 8 and 10% over 20 years. So last year what we did, and this is talking about some sort of a reservation, we introduced what are called supernumerary seats for girls. And why did we do that? We did that because when we looked at the data, we found that these women were clearing one of the toughest exams in the world, the Advanced Joint Entrance Exam, and yet they were not joining. And that takes me to an important point. We tried to find out why. And it turns out that parents, first of all, don't send enough girls for coaching for this exam. Parents are worried about safety. They don't want to send daughters to distant IITs. They would rather than send them to a local engineering college. Parents even worry about the cost if a Delhi girl has to come to Bombay, which they would never worry about in the case of a boy. They want him to go to the best IIT with the best department that he can get. And that brings me to gender inequality and how deep-rooted it is in this patriarchal society. Sorry to say that, but it is largely a patriarchal society. And if you look at, so it also brings me to household inequality within the household, gender discrimination. Monica said that, rich women ultimately inherit money, but not in India. It is males. I mean, even though in 2005, we revise the property laws, we find, and I'm doing a study on this currently, very few families are willing to, allow women to inherit or give them a proper share in property. And, that means a lot because it gives people ability to make decisions, choices. Anyway, I will quickly switch to 2-3 other points that I have to make. And another point that I want to make is that workplaces are built on the image of a man. So think in your mind, when you think of office goer, when you think of worker, it's the image of a man that comes to mind. Offices are built to suit the male body, not the female body, not to accommodate a menstruating, pregnant, lactating body, or a body with, women with children. So I think there's something fundamental, right from architecture to how women are accommodated in workplaces. And we don't consciously ever think about these things, but I think there are a lot of steps to be taken which will enable more women to join workplaces and to stay in those. Another thing peculiar to India, which is very, very resistant, is that women are, it's what we call the male breadwinner syndrome. And I think a lot of people in this room would know that even though that's the ideal and the stereotype that we have, many, many women out there, including poor women, are in the workplace. But still, when we think of head of household, we think of the man. Even though a lot of the literature shows that especially in poorer families, the women are the ones contributing to children's education, to children's health, well-being, the household well-being in general. So I think that particular syndrome, it might be changing, but it doesn't enter people's consciousness. And so there's a much deeper malaise in some senses that we have to address. I work a lot on the issue of the skewed sex ratio in India. The fact that as we have got richer, we have discriminated more against girl children by not even allowing them to be born. So this has been happening for 30 years now. Modern technology has enabled people to sex select. And so that's telling us something that why are girls not welcome? And I think girls are going to be the future workers. So it's really important to address this. There's a relationship between who is in the workplace and what is happening to those people at home. And, I have a little bit of disagreement with this co-creating gender equality because it seems to put the onus equally on women and men. But I think the onus should fairly and squarely be much more on men because they are in dominant positions. They need to step up and welcome women into the workplace, enable, headhunt for women, make sure that through various contributions to society that they make, like reproducing society through having kids, raising them, looking after older people, etc., that they can get back to work. So if you have maternity and paternity leave, mostly in India, wherever it's available, men don't take it up because they feel that it will affect their professional image. And if they do take it up, it's like a paid holiday. And women have entered the workplace, but they continue in India to bear the double burden of domestic works, household responsibilities. Even Indra Nooyi said that, and I do remember Sheryl Sandberg in her book saying that, talking about architecture and structures, that when she was in a board meeting, she turned to the man next to her and said, where is the ladies' bathroom? And he said, well, nobody's ever asked to go to one before. And when she was pregnant, she found that she had to walk a long way to her offices. So she finally went up to the boss and said that, please you better give me parking closer to the office. So here I just want to say one important thing. Recently we celebrated 8th March by celebrating women in science and technology at IIT Delhi, and we had very interesting panels. And one of the panels we had invited this woman, Nabila Mariam, and she works for Delhi Metro Rail Corporation. She's an engineer, young woman. She manages all the electrical systems of DMRC, and she said the first thing I go do at any workplace is to ask for a clean toilet and ensure that it is there. Unclean toilets and bad toilets keep girls out of school. They keep women out of work. Women train their bodies not to pee for 8 hours. All kinds of things with damage. So when I say workplaces and public spaces, etc., not built for the female body, we need to fundamentally rethink this, if we want them to be in the workplace. So I'll just end with one point, and we can talk about many of the things later. I think, we've been looking at the whole issue of sexual harassment at workplace, and it's a very important issue. In the sciences and academia, it was really under wraps until Me Too came along. And even now, women who are doing PhDs in science and technology find it very hard to come out and say what is happening to them. Because the culture of science is that you publish with your professors, there's a group, without that group you're nowhere. You don't have a career, you don't have a future. So they don't dare to complain. And these are highly educated women, or who are going to be, are already in the process of being. If they can't complain, if they can't get justice or redressal, then think of others who would be facing so many more problems. So I think we need to think of our public spaces. We need to ensure that women going to work have safety. It's a big issue in Delhi, in many of our small towns, everywhere, which is another reason why parents don't want to send girls to work. The other thing is, it's like in-laws are going to decide whether a woman should work, how a talented and professional person that she might be. And Ameera will talk more about that. But I think I'll finish there and maybe talk about other things when we come to the Q&A.
Thank you, Ravinder. You've covered some fascinating societal issues. Do you think since Me Too there has been, or even if it's a small, movement of change, awareness, recognition, something, or not?
I would say there's been quite a bit of backlash, very different from what we expected. Even feminists, initially, many of them, they were divided. Some of them supported it. Some of them said that this was not without due process. And there's this website called kafila.org, and there was a long discussion on it. But I've heard that even in the corporate world, there's a backlash. We've been organizing a lot of gender sensitization workshops in IIT Delhi, and the men typically come up, what is their takeaway from that? Their takeaway is, then we won't take girl students. Or, it will take so long for her to do a PhD because I can't meet her after hours. And people are like, men mostly think, is this to scare us? So I would, just the idea behind Me Too was that it would give a message or information to women as to who to avoid in the workplace. So I feel that, it has an important role to play, but it's kind of petered out already.
Thank you. Thanks, Ravinder. I did have another question, but I'll save it for the general audience. Would like to hear more about that completely different issue around the workplace built in the image of a man. I think that is perhaps some practical things we can do better there. But let me go over to Anurag. Anurag, if you give us your brief comments.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Monica. Yeah, so, we at 13D, we take a global top-down approach on the subject, but I'll try to kind of keep my remarks global and short. So, I mean, one of the very important thing which is very close to my heart and which I try to put forward every time I speak about it is that I think the debate around gender equality should be in a different way or a different perspective to look at it, is that we should strive to take the world towards gender neutrality, basically. Because benchmarking women potential against men potential is basically, in my view, is misplaced. They have their own capabilities, their own strengths, weaknesses. Men has their own strengths and weaknesses. So, I mean, in my view, we need to create opportunities for both the sexes and let them compete on that. So, with this, I mean, I would say that, but because we are living right now in the best exciting times in the human history because of the emerging technologies creating level playing field for the companies, for the gender and all. So I think if you look at the agricultural to the industrial revolutions, it was more of the physical strength which was required to do the work, which was probably not the area of comfort for the women. But now with the advent of this technology and how they are providing information to them, education in the remotest part of the countries and the world, a level playing field is being created. And there have been studies, several studies which kind of point toward that, talk about that women participation, greater participation in workforce leads to better decisions, net profit margins, and etc. So I'll give you a couple of examples. Credit Suisse had this research which was done on 27,000 managers across 3,000 companies, which proved that if we have a 25% participation of women in key decision-making roles, the cash flow returns were 4% more than the MSCI All Countries Index. And if we increase it to 50%, the ratio changes to 10%. So, and then another important study done by Peterson, which was done on about 22,000 companies across 91 countries, found that if we have around 30% women in the workforce in the key decision-making roles, the net profit margin increased by 1%. And then their universe had around 6.7% net profit margin, so it is about 15% boost to their profitability. So with this, what I'm trying to suggest here is that the women are very important for the workforce. One very important thing which we researched upon is the brain map of women versus men. So how they are wired to take different kind of decisions, and why this is important in the workplace. Because women, they are very good at soft skills like reading faces, making deep connections, relationships, resolving conflicts, risk awareness. They have different attitude towards financial risk. So all these are very important soft skills which are important in an organization. In comparison, men are more prone to take quick decisions and quick actions. And also, I mean, there was a study by Deloitte which said that these kind of soft skills would be more important, at least twice important than manual skills, with this machine economy coming into picture and more robotics taking over the jobs. So I think, I mean, having more women in the workforce is very, very important, not even just for women, for the businesses, for the countries, and even for men. I mean, there have been studies which kind of study the data for about 40 years or so, which say that the women, greater participation of the women in workforce improve the economic output of the countries as well. For example, the women who earn more money, so they invest it into their children education, better nutrition for the family, healthcare, which in long term kind of provide more economic benefits to the countries. And also, we did a study on the happiness index and compared it with the gender gap index. So we found that the narrowest gender gap index, the top companies in the gender gap index were highly correlated with the countries on the happiness index. So that also kind of proves that if we have greater participation of the women in workforce, the countries become happier and prosperous. So the study also suggested that it is good for children. They are less likely to be taken to the psychiatrist. They perform better at their studies, extracurricular activities. And for men, I mean, now with at least in the Western world, with the advent of millennials and even the managers reaching their 40s and 50s, they are taking out time to spend more time with their families, and they want to be part of the emotional upbringing of their children, basically. And this is kind of addresses to the boys' crisis, which we have written about extensively. So when they spend more time with the family, and they want to get away from the sole breadwinner role. So when they do that, they are less likely to be drug addict or less likely to consume more alcohol. They are more prone to take preventive medicines, preventive health care. So that also kind of improves their productivity and economic output of the companies when they work. So I mean, all of this kind of points towards and make a big case that we should have more participation of women in the workplace. India, I mean, of course, has a different starting point, so there's a long way to go. But I would like to end with a positive note that are there problems? Yes, definitely. Are we going to make a change? Are we going to be able to change the narrative? Absolutely. I'm 100% sure about it.
Thanks, Anurag. What about some data around the opportunity cost? Numbers always talk, and they always prompt change.
Yeah, I mean, one very important data point around this is that India is home to about 17% of the global women population. And we have around 175 million girls under the age of 15. I mean, imagine in about 5-7 years, they'll be looking out for the jobs, and we have to create opportunities for them. But I mean, on the other side, if we just increase the share of women in the workforce to the level of the male, we'll have 235 million women in the workforce, which is more than the entire Europe workforce, and would be able to fill all the factories in the rest of Asia. So, I mean, there's a huge opportunity there.
Great, thank you. I mean, I'm sure we'll explore a bit more on those numbers. Ameera, first of all, congratulations on being a successful entrepreneur and leader. We'd love to hear your story.
Thank you. And thanks for having me here, guys. You know, and before we talk about co-creating gender equality in the workspace, I think it's important to understand, you know, where does gender equality or inequality really stem from, right? And it all starts from the home, and it all starts from how we parent and how we child rear. And I think the fundamental issue that we struggle with, especially in India, is that the success, the identity for a man, usually as they're brought up, is told to be financial and professional success, right? If you're not a professional success as a man, you know, unfortunately in this society, you're considered somewhere not to have reached your potential. The same way for a woman, if you've not had established a seemingly happy family life, you could be the biggest rock star on the planet, but you know, you have not achieved your identity of being what you should have accomplished your entire life. So I think when we are born with these fundamental perceptions of what our identity is, and we only feel comfortable in our skin when we've achieved professional success or when we've achieved what we call as personal family success, we're starting from the point where women fundamentally are not seeking professional success or not seeking intellectual success or stimulation as their form of happiness. So therefore, the fundamental basis is that the motivation is going to be lacking. So when it comes down to making tough choices about saying that, look, should I stay at home and take care of my family, or should I go and work, which means I'm going to compromise my family because that's what everybody tells her? The answer is obvious. She'll say, I'll stay at home and I'll take care of my family because in my mind, that's my identity. And my identity is my personal and family success. Because I could be earning 10 lakhs a month, but if that's compromised, everybody in my life is going to deem me as a failure. So I think we've got to go back to the psychology of who we are as a people in this country and how we are reared. And I don't think we can even begin to address the gender equality in the workspace until we address the gender norms at home. I see, as I interact with some of the most educated men, in our societies today, the most educated men I see are actually, their minds have changed. They actually are looking at their wives differently. They're looking at their mothers differently. They feel like they want their mothers and wives to have a voice because they saw their fathers not giving that to their mothers, right? And they bore the brunt of it, seeing their mother in that situation. So they want their wives to have somewhat of a voice. But at the end of the day, what strikes them the most is actually not so much when you talk to them about their wives, but when you talk to them about their daughters. Right? And when you talk to them about what their daughter's future could be. And, I've landed up sharing a little bit of my experience, which has actually struck a chord with many of the fathers of daughters. And, as an entrepreneur, and I've shared this before as well, as an entrepreneur, the fundamental basis on which you can build or create anything, male or female, is the ability to take risk. And it's the ability to thrive in uncertainty. Because as an entrepreneur, nothing is given. You don't have a brand, you don't have money that that's coming in every day, you don't know how you're going to pay salaries, you don't know where you're going to eat, everything is uncertain. So you have to have the ability to thrive in uncertainty and the ability to take risk. Boys, from the time they're brought up, are actually encouraged to go out and take risk in very simple ways. If a boy wants to go out and play, even if he lands up getting hurt, he'll come home. The mother will say, don't worry, put a band-aid, you're fine, go and play. Go have fun with your friends, right? It could be that he's out playing cricket till 9 o'clock at night and the mother will still encourage. The father will encourage him and say, go have fun, do your thing. If the same thing as a daughter she's doing, the first point would be, oh, it's 8 o'clock, come home, it's dark, it'll not be safe. Oh, you got hurt, don't go out again. And the fathers of today have gone, I find the educated fathers have now gone to the other extreme. They're so fawning over their daughters. They're so happy to have daughters, which is wonderful. But they have made all of them into little princesses, right? Where they want to bottle them up and put them in a little glass thing and take care of them all day and stroke their hair and make sure they're fine. Great. But as a daughter, what do you learn up hearing, right? You grow up hearing either one of two things. You're growing up hearing, I'm so fragile that I have to be put in a glass wall and somebody has to take care of me all the time, which basically means I don't have the capability to take care of myself. I need my father to take care of me, I need my husband to take care of me, I need XYZ to take care of me, which basically means you have no ability to take risk and you have no ability to be in an uncertain position. So anytime you're in any position of uncertainty, you get anxiety and you react to your emotions. So the minute your husband loses his job, you go crazy. The minute your child, has a hard time in school, you go crazy. And you're reacting to constant anxiety, which is the way we are conditioned as kids, right? So I think the first discussion really has to go back to how are we bringing up our daughters at home, and are we giving them that exposure to take risk? Are we giving them experiences that allow them to learn from it? I'll give you a simple example that my own mother did with me. I mean, I remember when I was in college and I used to take the bus and I used to go to college, right? And what normally happens in buses in most of India is, as a woman, you get hassled and you get molested and you get fondled. This is common practice. I'm sure every woman here at some point in her life has experienced this, right? Now, as fathers, the fathers get very perturbed by this. Oh my God, this happened to my daughter. Even the mothers do. So the first reaction is, beta, don't go by bus. Tomorrow take a taxi, or tomorrow I'll come and drop you every day so that you're okay. My mother actually took me to the side and she said, the next time this happens to you on the bus, this is what you're going to do. Put your elbows out, do this, do that, make a noise, etc. She taught me how to deal with the situation. And I think the best thing we can do for the women in our society is to teach them how to deal with uncertainty versus making them shy away from uncertainty. To me, that's really the basis of going to then deal with professional situations where you begin to create equality in the workplace, right? Because equality in the workplace means what? It basically means giving an opportunity. It means movement on merit. It means a woman having a voice. You know, we were talking about governance in boards today. Unfortunately, you see a lot of women being trained to be independent directors. But unless you have the confidence to actually have a voice, say what you have to say with confidence because it comes through real experience, that voice is not going to be heard. And that's going to make the women even more timid and even more meek and stay quiet, right? Because it's not an easy place to be. I've sat in multiple board meetings and multiple occasions where I've sat with 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 men. And I'm the single woman trying to give my point of view. And often the men will say, oh, that doesn't matter, you know, shutting it down. Now it's up to me on how I react. Am I going to shut up? Or am I actually going to make my point more forcefully? And that depends on my confidence. And that depends on my ability to speak my voice and have confidence in it. Now that doesn't come easily based on the way that we're conditioned. So, you know, actually my viewpoint is that we actually have to co-create the gender equality in the workspace because it is not so much only about what the men are doing, it's also about what the women are doing, right? Because as a man, if we put the responsibility on the men and say, you are in the position of power, now carry the women along with you, but if the women are not wanting to be carried, if the desire is lacking, if the women are not having the confidence to be taken along, that's only going to go so far. So I think it has to be a practical approach of saying, yes, let's create regulation, let's create environments, let's create education, let's have awareness and discussions that bring this conversation on hand and have these discussions, but it's also about bringing the women up. It's about bringing the women to a space of confidence, of desire, of dreaming, of actually saying, you know what, I want this, because nobody can drag you to the water and make you drink it. You have to be able to wanting to actually get there. So in my mind, this is very much going to be a 50-year plan where we have to actually start from home, go to schools, go to colleges, and frankly, the workspace comes much later because by the time we are in the workspace, we're already adults and we already are conditioned. To recondition ourselves when we are in the workspace is much harder than conditioning ourselves when we're children. Thanks.
Ameera, thank you. I mean, that was really interesting. So that thinking that entitlement at home reduces your ability to deal with risk and uncertainty is a really interesting thought process. In your business, are you tougher on women in your own business because of that?
I don't think so. I mean, I have one of my female employees sitting right here. You should ask her that question. But and you asked me this question earlier as well, that have I been different as a leader, as a female, as a woman? I've definitely been different as a leader, as a woman, because I think your psychology and your conditioning plays such a big role of it. Yeah. And initially, in the early days, I was, like every other female leader, wanting to appear strong and wanting to appear confident and not doubting myself, etc. And so what happens is that because men need us to appear aggressive for to be taken seriously, we start becoming aggressive. And at some point, I realized, and I said, look, I'm not going to behave the way he wants me to behave. I'm going to behave the way I want to behave, and he better adjust to it. I'm his boss, right? So I started actually showing my emotional side at work. I actually started being emotional with my employees when necessary. I mean, some of my employees have seen me cry. Some of my employees have seen me really upset. Some of them have seen me really happy. And I've allowed myself to be me in my workspace along with being me at home. And that has allowed me actually to have the confidence that if there are people who can't deal with that, then frankly, they have to go, not me. Right? And of course, I have the privilege because I'm the boss in my situation. Not everybody has that privilege. It does help. But, I don't think it's about being tougher on women or not. I think it's about using tough love and about using kind love with men and women as and when necessary. I get quite annoyed with women in the workspace who want to be victims. I don't like it at all. Because I don't see women as victims and I don't see men as victors. And I think if we stop seeing ourselves as victims, we'll actually go far ahead. Right. So the first thing is to remove the barriers in our mind. So if I see any of my female employees behaving like a victim, I can be quite tough on them.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much for sharing that story with us. So, Animesh, you're the guy right at the front of it, really. You're the chief people officer, bringing about all the change. So tell us what you're working on and what you're thinking.
So, thank you, and thank you, Society, for this opportunity. Fully agree with all the points that were made, and especially around the whole issue of that we need to co-create. And I'm going to really focus the entire narrative around how do you co-create? Because organizations, I think, and I've dealt with this question very often, that what is the role of organizations in driving societal change? Because as been rightly pointed out, a lot of this is embedded in a certain social attitude we have as a society. And I think it is incumbent upon organizations to lead this process. So with that narrative, I think every time when we've looked at this whole process of creating gender-blind workplaces in Zeal, and I have personally looked at this without emotion and looking at how has one really driven organization transformations and what learnings can one apply from that. About 10, 15 years back, employee engagement was the buzzword. And then there was research and there was processes and all kinds of panel discussion, everything that we are doing now to bring employee engagement front and center, and it is now one of the more important metrics that is measured across. Analysts will look at it, boards will evaluate it, and the rest of it. So the first process that we are doing is making the case for change. And the case for change is very obvious. The most cursory Google search will throw up a copious amount of literature on how diversity is good for business. Anurag shared some data, and if you look at McKinsey, Peterson, Credit Suisse, Gallup, all of them have put out large amounts of data which says when you have better gender diversity and overall diversity in a sense, you get better financial performance by statistically valid differences. So we're not just looking at correlation now we're looking at causality. And I think it's very important to understand that correlation and causality are different. So more women, and it goes anecdotally to the point that the greater you reflect the cultural and gender diversity of the markets that you serve, the more likely you are to succeed because you capture the market insight better. So that's the case for change. And this case for change is very important because organizations, and like each one of us, deals with both conscious and unconscious bias. And honestly, the conscious bias is easy to deal with. You can mandate it, you can create laws around it, you can fix quotas, you can do all kinds of things. But the real challenge for organizations and the opportunity for design thinking really comes in dealing with unconscious bias. And in doing that within Zeal, we've really postulated 3 axioms. So we're moving away from interventions that have typically been derided by a lot of men in organizations as creating SOPs and privileges. And we're saying, okay, and that has the unintended consequence of hardening attitudes about bringing more women into the workplace. So we postulated 3 axioms, which is men and women are equal. Not physically, but as people who come to work, they're equal. 2, more women than men, though the numbers are clearly increasing, do a wider variety of roles, and many of which are time sensitive. And 3, there is a, how do I say that? There is a need, and no professional worth their salt really wants SOPs and privileges to get to your level of achievement. And with those 3, we've therefore adopted work flexibility as the central tenet of org design. And it's a very important part because we're examining questions like, why should you have a workplace? Or do all jobs need to require you to travel to a physical location? Because traveling to a physical location, at least in India, creates a big challenge for a lot of women. So how do you design that away? How do you design that disadvantage that women have by saying that you can work from home or you can work from anywhere. Home is just one location, but you can be working from anywhere. And more importantly, all the design that we are bringing is open to everyone. It's not designed for women specifically. It's designed for employees. If I can reduce 3 hours of commute for employees every day, it benefits men and women are able to leverage that to do a lot more. And the last piece is really looking at structural interventions. And the point that you made, Anurag, on technology, and I think technology is playing a dramatically different role in a more powerful way. If you look at organizations, we've really hired people and captured time. For the longest time, we've got people and we've said you need to be in a physical place and we will measure you for 8 hours or 9 hours or 10 hours or whatever work that you do. And that has been the defining characteristic of work or workplaces. What technology does today is it allows you increasingly to measure outcomes. And the more you're able to measure outcomes, the less you need people to be aggregated into specific areas, hugely increasing my ability to allow flexibility for org design and doing all kinds of radical things like there are roles that we are creating which we don't have a desk at work. You only work from home, man, woman, or anybody else. You only work from home. You're not required to come to office. On the odd occasion that you need to, you come and get into a meeting room. So that's some of the structural pieces that we are doing. My personal experience in this entire area is there's one additional or two additional pieces that I think we need to focus on. And that, and I'll pick up the thread from what Ameera said around leadership. It is imperative that this becomes the leadership narrative in an organization. And each leader, unfortunately, has their own leadership bias, irrespective of whether they are men or women. I've had to deal with a lot of women who have the same unconscious biases that men leaders have. So how do you get them to champion this? How do you get them to shift their narrative, shift their perspective, so that organizations become a lot more equal is the wrong word, but really become gender blind. And facetiously, I think every time I've run into a problem, I just talk to the leader about how she or he would like their daughters to be treated at work. I think it solves the problem immediately, the penny drops, and you can move on very, very quickly. And the second piece that we are working on is improving supply. How do you create larger and larger numbers of supply? And that encompasses everything. How do you get women who are getting back into the workplace after motherhood? How do you deploy differentially learning and development dollars around women? How do you increase the intake at fresh campus hiring so that just the number of women who are getting into the workplace increases? So I don't think it's an easy battle at all, but it is a battle that needs to be fought. And in my view, we've hit that inflection point where I think the last time we hit it was the Second World War, because men went to war and women went to work. And they never got out of work, so it created a huge step jump of women at workplaces. And the second inflection point is now because technology and all the various other pieces that we've spoken about is creating an equal context which has never existed before. So carpe diem is the way to go right now.
Animesh, thank you. That was really interesting. How do you, in your organization, when you talk about a transformation, how long do you think that journey would be to make structural change, to change a working model into something more flexible? What sort of a time frame do you think that would take?
I think the structural changes are easy. You need the right HR person to do that. So for example, we are replacing, or we are bringing a lot more technology into hiring because there's just a huge amount of bias at hiring. So, and today technology has come up the curve enough that you can actually do a large amount of hiring without technology. And we're already seeing that when you take people, again, most of our TA team happens to be women, but when you take people out of TA, you get a lot more women and CVs that are coming through the door than historically men CVs have come through the door. So some things will be easy. The conscious bias, as I mentioned, is, I think, a lot easier to deal with because it's out there in your face. You can find solutions for it. What I think is going to be the 50-year process is the unconscious bias that we need to identify and continuously design for.
Thank you. A moment just to thank all our panelists. I mean, really interesting perspectives, answered the question, and actually you got through it in record time, so well done. Let's open it up to the audience. This is your opportunity now. We've got about 10, 15 minutes to hear from you. Let me start with, I'm sorry, I just want to check where the microphones are. Okay, let's take that one first and we'll come to you next.
Hi. My name is Dharmendra Rai. I train on a subject called mind mapping and also do a lot of research on the brain. I just want to very briefly just get this part of the science out of the way, that research upon research proves that women have superior brains as far as work requirements are concerned. They have better creativity, they have better emotional intelligence. So men have already lost the race. They just don't realize that. So that's the first part. The second part is, I think there are plenty of wars that are being fought on the wrong fronts. And just to, in the interest of time, I'm just going to mention two fronts on which this war is being fought. One is reservations. And I was at a seminar where Ms. Shanti Ikambaram, who's the chief executive of Kotak Mahindra Bank, said that I don't want to be on the board of directors because I'm a lady. I want to be there because I deserve it. So this fighting a battle on the wrong front can weaken a person's position, can weaken a group's position because it gives rise to very strong resistance. The second wrong front is brought out by the story of Elizabeth Holmes of Theranos. If you read the book Bad Blood by the Wall Street guy who broke the story, Carrie Ford, he said one of the reasons why she managed to con so many people is because people were desperate to see a lady chief executive of a tech company. I'm sure there must have been plenty of people who said that we don't have enough representation of ladies in an industry. Again, I think that's a totally wrong way to look at it. If you just focused on pushing for merit, more women would come up anyway. So I was just wondering if I could have your views on that.
The specific question? That you,
yeah.
And is it directed to anybody?
No, to everybody. Do you think that's happening? Are some wars being fought on the wrong front here? Mm-hmm. Or maybe is there an overkill? Because there's a natural progression going to happen anyway. Mm-hmm. Just as Anurag said, you required skills which men were good at before, but now you require skills which women are good at. So it's a natural progression anyway.
I think you'd probably agree, but I don't know, Ravi, from your experience, academic experience, if there's a response to that.
I think I would disagree on various things. Even
I take back my comment there.
On some things with the panel. First of all, brain science is showing that the brain is not really hardwired, but that it is plastic, malleable. And a lot of what we have inherited today as feminine and masculine brains are absolutely because of the socialization that Ameera talked about, right from day one. And girls imbibe the sense of inequality and lower value. And since they don't get to interact with the outside world, as she said, they don't develop the skills. But I'm not very keen on women working from home, because that's been shown to be counterproductive for women. Maybe when they reach a point when everything is equal, it'll be fine, because they get excluded. They cannot network. They do not know what other women are earning. A lot of literature on women who do work out of the house shows, and there's a very famous anthropologist, Maria Mies, who's written extensively on this. And she shows that because they lack relating to other people in the workplace, they are easily taken advantage of. So I wouldn't really say, let women work at home. And one other point I wanted to make was that, if we look at India's female labor force participation, it's dropped to 25.3% in rural areas and 15.5% in urban areas. So what are we talking about? It's great to be talking about at a point where all of us have arrived, but we have to look at the vast population that is struggling out there. And we want to think about, why is there, India has one of the lowest workforce participation rates in the world. Various reasons, good and bad. The good is that more women are in education and for longer, so they're showing up less in the workforce. But many educated and better off women are dropping out to do what another sociologist called concerted cultivation, meaning, as she said, bring up the kids to be these successful people. And she takes a back seat. But we find that, taking a back seat doesn't work for women ultimately, even if it's for the good of the family. We love the family in India, it's like our idol, etc. But women really are the sacrifice, sacrifice at the altar of the family. And I think they need to learn that they don't need to do so. That's where I feel the men have to come in more. And it's really, really important. So that's what I feel, that, we need to also, I think, you said that the desire is lacking. Now, I travel a lot over rural and urban India for work, and I find that despite the gendered socialization that we have, the desire in women to engage with the world and work is not lacking. But as a sociologist, I must come back to the fact that the structural barriers are immense. And so it isn't just, the top-down thing that matters. It's also changing those structures. And maybe, if we have men thinking about and women thinking about how to change those structures, that will help the process to become faster. Because, nobody likes to lose their powerful position. And men, even if change is happening, don't want that to happen. So there's a crisis of masculinity out there as well, which we need to think about. And what could be the backlash? Gender violence is a backlash of the crisis of masculinity. And which, I just read another research paper which showed that when the press is reporting a lot of sexual and gender violence, fewer women are going to come out to work, and fewer parents are going to send women out to work. So those are things we need to, absolutely take care of.
Thank you, Ravinder. Thank you very much. This lady.
Okay. Swapna Vora here, and my objection is to the term maternity leave. It has to be family leave. If you don't have children, maybe you have an aging parent. And if I'm out on maternity leave or my kids need me on Saturday, the organization has to have someone to pick up the slack. It cannot be somebody without children all the time. It's just not fair. So the other thing is not to say women who go to work, women who get paid to work. Everybody's working, whether it's washing the dishes or not. So they're working all right. It's the payment that's an issue. And the third thing is not a question, a comment. Sudha Murthy and my 98-year-old aunt, who's a doctor, said they had to train their bodies not to need a loo for 4.5 hours. Sudha Murthy's engineering college did not have a women's toilet, neither did my aunt's medical school. So these are very simple things to sort out.
And probably goes back to Ravinder's point about the image at the workplace in the image of
No, the term women who work and maternity leave are inaccurate.
Thank you for those interesting comments.
So I had a question, I think it's directed to Ravinder. It's about the gender ratio. As a country, we always read these shocking statistics, right? It's 700 to 1,000. I think intellectually we understand that in the future we'll have a lot of social imbalances, whether it's, I'm making this up, kidnapping brides or crimes against women. Yet at the same time, I see very wealthy and very educated middle class families secretly going off abroad, doing sex determination, or having that coveted third child. So my question is, what is that psychology at play? Because intellectually we know this is not good. Yet, I'm sure there are people in this room who've done it, who know people who've done it. So it's not a poor person's problem. Can you just shed some light on what is society thinking at a lower socioeconomic level and upper? Ravinder.
So you're absolutely right. It's not a problem restricted to either rural India or to poorer people. In fact, a lot of reasonably well-to-do people are also sex selecting. And so it goes back to this idea that, sons are going to be more valuable to the family. It's really what we call son preference. And actually, son preference is a global phenomenon, except that it doesn't get translated into what it gets translated into India. And here, I think, I've done a lot of research on this, and I find that generally, when families and classes, social classes, are mobile, they tend to repose more faith in sons, so they want more sons. And we find that, generally when women get slightly more educated and families become somewhat richer, they tend to discriminate even more. And this I've mapped both quantitatively and qualitatively, but there is a ray of hope. When they move on to be much more highly educated and have better incomes also, when choosing between whether to invest in a daughter, which is often thought of as watering the other's garden, because your daughter is going to get married and move away, and everything that you've invested in her is not going to come back and help your family. So those are some fundamental issues. But as I said, there is a ray of hope in the sense that we find that people who are educated, not all, I mean, you have college teachers sex selecting and doctors sex selecting, but the idea is that people would be thinking differently about the value of sons and daughters. So that's, I think, an evolving story.
Thank you, Ravinder. I'm going to take two questions, where the mics are, but then I'm going to ask the audience a question that the panel would like to ask you. So I just want to make sure that we get that in the next few minutes. So if I could ask the people that have the mics to be brief. So go ahead.
Hi, my question, this is Gina from 13D London. My question is for Animesh. Being the chief people's officer for such a big institution, what would you say are your top three absolute achievements that you would consider for this year towards co-creating gender equality?
Gina, just as a caveat, it's been less than 9 months that I've joined SEAL, so a little early to say top three achievements. But I think the most important one is that we've got creating a gender-blind workplace front and center in the organization. So whether it's at the promoter level or at the business CEO level, this is an agenda that is now absolutely clearly articulated, and we'll measure it, obviously. And the second one, I think, is to shift the narrative from to dealing with the unconscious bias that exists. Because I think that's where we are going to make the bigger differences in the way we are able to build the organization. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Thank you.
So there are two ways we classify in our creative. So the entire organization, I'm going to take a minute, in the heart of the organization, which is marketing, promotion creation, content creation, storytelling, all of that, we are at 50-50. So 51-49, one is 51, the other 49. As we get into the more operational jobs that are run on shifts, 24/7 shifts, our ratios drop to about 20%. So sales and operation is 20%, but the heart of the organization where we create IP is about 50%. Except at the top five, at the top of the house where there are 5 of us, that's all male at the moment. I mean, I think there is a real challenge of availability, and therefore the whole supply side interventions that we need to drive. But as we go to the next level, it's about 32%.
Thank you. And
My name is Amrita. I work for the University of Edinburgh here in Mumbai and lead a small team myself. In my experience, and my question is to both Professor Ravinder and Ameera, in my almost 20 years of working, I've seen a great deal of diversity in how women look in the workplace. And my question is, what is your perspective on what women in the workplace should look like ideally? There is a great deal of judgment, unfortunately, within women, whether they're working or not. For women who don't work, they judge women who work. For example, you're a bad mother because you're not around. Women who do work, judge women who don't work for going to kitty parties and things like that. Even women who are already in the workplace, they judge each other for different working styles. Perhaps, okay, you're just trying to be, a man in a woman's body, and someone else is trying to be overtly feminine. And, this, I think, hampers the cause of women in the workplace. So how does one address that?
do you mean what they look like, how they appear?
No, that's just one small part of it.
Just
it's
the
whole,
total, okay.
Yes.
The presence.
I mean, I think you're absolutely right where, there is a lot of... I think you're absolutely right where there is definitely a lot of judgment, and I think, again, we've got to go to understand why. My theory on that is that because there are such few women, and even if you see mothers, and the reason why son preference exists is because the perception of power being with the man, right? The financial power, the decision-making power, which is why mothers want the son, and then they want to be close to the son because then they have access to power, right? I think similarly in the workspace, women are always trying to find their access to power, and it's not necessarily coming from other women, right? Because the other women are not necessarily very senior. And it's almost like you have very few women who are trying to climb to the top, and it's easier to get there if you push the other ones a little bit lower, and because you're sort of in a race with everybody else. So I think it fundamentally comes from that insecurity of saying that, look, I'm not good enough, and I'm not sure about my choices. I'm doubtful about my own thoughts about why I'm doing what I'm doing, and my own guilt around or my own desires about being certain things, and I'm not able to be them, which is what creates a lot of this judgment, where women are very quick to sort of damn another one for whatever their choices are. I don't think really the workplace can deal with this in a very productive manner. I think it has to go back to each of our own self-awareness and about figuring out really what our own insecurities are, our own doubts are, and really finding a way. And I think the best an organization can do is just to have more and more discussion and hope that somebody will take away something from that discussion to introspect and say, look, is there a better way for me to get comfortable and have confidence and trust in my own choices? Because the minute you're more secure, honestly, the judgment just drops, right? Because then you let everybody be and sort of live and let live versus, judging the world sort of around us. It's just my thought.
Thank you, Ameera. Let's take this gentleman here has been waiting. A last brief question.
I'm Vishwas Sarmukadam from Terana Group of Education. We are running medical college, engineering college, dental college. For me, at our institute, most of the key positions are occupied by the women only. Even in our hospital, medical superintendent is lady. So I'm very happy that gender equality is already there. So far as home is concerned, my daughter is doing very well in US. She's in the management side, and my wife is gynecologist. So no question about it. My suggestion, or rather a question to Shah madam is, 70-30% is the ratio, or 30% is reserved in the government sector for admissions, and as well as for the jobs also, secured for the woman. So in corporate sector, do you think that some such imposition of the act will improve some position? And another thing, in metro, urban and rural, there are the three tier sectors. So basically in metros, this gender equality is largely there. But so far as the rural things are concerned, whether the consciousness is, this awareness program, will it be helpful?
I mean, on the first question in terms of reservations, I don't personally believe in that idea at all. I think at the end of the day, unless you create, to Animesh's point, unless you create the supply, and there is a genuine paucity of supply at especially the senior levels, unless you create that supply, if we go and put artificial reservations on top of that, all we are going to land up doing is creating resentment amongst men, causing not as competent, capable people in the workspace, and therefore corporations and the economy, you know, therefore potentially suffering, and also there not being a team spirit, which is what the fundamental thing you require in a corporation for it to work. So I'm not in favor at all on reservations. However, I do believe that we have to actively work at creating that supply. Like we said, in my opinion, part of it is doing all the structural reforms that we talked about, and the second part of it is addressing the identity of women. And you know, genuinely, if she's saying that she's traveled so much and there's desire, I'm very happy to hear that, because then that just makes it easier for us actually to put the structural reforms and make it actually work out much faster. Maybe it can be reduced from 50 years to 25 years. But, sorry, what was your second question? On the rural versus urban. Look, yeah, I mean, look, dialogue is the most basic thing, right? I think the reason we're all sitting here is for the same reason, that the more we put these subjects on the table, the more we talk about them. The only challenge is that I think we have to go when people are younger. I think the conversation amongst adults is useful, but the conversation has to be had with children. Because at the end of the day, I mean, they are, you know, children are going to follow what they see at home with their parents. If their mother has been a homemaker, the most likely situation is that the daughter is going to also be a homemaker unless she has had some other influence in her life that has exposed her and motivated her to think beyond and to have a different dream. And I think if we're able to create those influences and role models at a very young age, then I think we are in a much better situation to move towards the direction that we're all wanting to move towards.
Thank you. So, because we're almost out of time, the question that the panel would like to ask the audience is, those of you who are leaders in the room, what have you done that's worked? Would you like to share that with us? I can see a hand over there, gentleman over there, the back.
Good evening.
Hello.
My name is Shahzid Lahiri and I am from Ceasefire. So we are in the vertical of fire protection. We are also working in, you know, with the Mumbai Fire Brigade, and it is a great point to share that women firefighters have been inducted now in the brigade, and we in the fraternity are highly supporting it and working with them. So gender equality is now, you know, it's advanced to that level.
What's the percentage of women firefighters in the...
18% now.
18?
Yeah, in the force.
Not bad. Very good. Thank you.
Monica, just to add, India has the highest number of female pilots, and I am proud to say that the flight I came by from Delhi was piloted by a woman. So things are changing, but I think there's a long, long way to go still. And on the reservations thing, I differ slightly. I agree that a pipeline has to be created, but unless that push is given, and again, if I go back to the IIT example, we found that if we, you know, the women, irrespective on the grades and the rank that they're coming in, are performing one grade better than men. So, but they don't get a leg up or a foot in. And I think we've seen in panchayats where there was reservation for women, initially it was terrible, but now more and more women are, you know, standing up. And also they are bringing in issues of health and education and total well-being, rather than, you know, doing the horse trading and all of the other stuff, or funneling away money to themselves that men typically tend to do.
Thank you. Anyone else want to add a brief story? Lady? Yeah? Thank you.
So my name is Anita. I head a small research collective. And what we have done, we have a small team, but we have ensured that when we do hiring, there is gender equity is kept. We keep a balance of gender, ethnicity, and for us, gender is not just male and female. That's one point which usually gets omitted in the discussions related to gender equality. And I think that needs to be put in the center. In addition to the regular things which we do, 6 months of full paid maternity leave, 3 weeks of paternity leave, we have also started a project where we are actually teaching the self-help groups in the tribal regions of Palgar how to access internet. We have been training them in ICT training and actually telling them how critical it is for them to participate in the Panchayat Raj working, go to Gram Sabhas, raise their voices, and tell their stories. Unless they take an active part in the functioning of their village, things will not work. And we actually have seen some wonderful results, as Professor Kaur was saying. In some of the panchayats which are headed by women, there is definitely a better disbursement of funds towards health, education, and sanitation. And also, there is a certain checks and balances related to siphoning of the public money, especially when it comes to schemes like PESA or 14th Finance Commission. So we have seen some wonderful results on that, and I'm very proud to say out of 3 verticals we have, they all are headed by 3 women.
Anita, thank you for sharing that. That's great.
May I?
This will be the last question, so please do.
That's not so much of a question, but anyway, since you said anyone has a story. I work for an institution, it's an academic institution, and I teach. And in the last program Shaili Chopra had was at ISDI. And one of the speakers, Vinita Singh, had put up a PPT in which there's a cat on one side. And in the mirror, the reflection is of a tiger. Her intention being that we are all cats and we should show ourselves as tigers to encourage ourselves. And I thought to myself, God, in my case and in all the faculty who teach in my institute, the women especially, is the other way around. We are all tigers and we are pretending to be cats. Because my boss, at last count, he said, you're an unusual breed. And he calls me Mufat and many other things. So how do you deal with guys like that? Any suggestions from anybody? Don't be too aggressive, keep quiet, be sweet and polite. If a man raises his voice, oh, he's being a man. And if I raise my voice, I'm being in, fish market, so on and so forth.
Thank you. I think there's an answer coming.
So I faced a lot of this as well, and not only internally, but with customers. I've gone into offices where, they know I own the business, and I've gone in with my manager to go and negotiate a deal. And for the entire hour, the guy on the other side would only look at my manager and talk to him. He wouldn't even look at me, right? Now, this is something which happens, right? And I figured out that one way is to react to it and get angry and say, what the hell, like how can this happen? The other way is to try and come down and say, hey, where's this coming from, right? So I understood that where it was coming from was the guy didn't mean any offense to me. It's not that he didn't respect me, because that was my interpretation at the time, but it was actually that he wasn't used to sitting across a woman and knowing how to talk business. He was actually intimidated by and overwhelmed by the idea that there was a woman sitting across as an equal and having to deal with me. The minute I understood that, my reaction to him changed, and the way I started talking to him, I actually found a change in his behavior. He actually wanted to talk to me much more than he would want to talk to the guy who was, 5 levels, junior. So my only takeaway from it is, I think the key is actually managing the emotion and the reaction, because our initial instinct is actually to get upset by it, but is to maybe take some of the input, and if we are, in some cases, man or woman, being too blunt in a workspace, there is something to learn from that, and there is some way to modulate and to be diplomatic, because that's required in any team environment, but not allow it to curtail our spirit. So is there a way that we can continue to be aggressive in the marketplace or in what we're doing, but not be aggressive in temperament, right? And I think that fine-tuning of our personalities and allowing our emotions to control our reactions, I think to me has been one of the key parts of actually reacting to it differently.
Great advice. I have been missing somebody, So go ahead.
Hi.
You're the last one.
It's a very small question. It's to Anurag. You had mentioned a study where the net profit margin increased by 5% or 10%. Sorry? 1%.
It was 1%.
When the number of women increased.
Yeah, so the study said that when you increase, I mean, when there is, when the ratio of the women in the decision-making role is about 30%, the net interest margin for those set of companies was 1% higher than the rest of the group.
So my question is that, was the salary at the same par when you are counting that?
Salary of
the women, like the number of women increased, have you factored in the salary? What income, like they are coming at the same level as the men, or was that factored in?
No, I mean, no. So, I don't think so that the salary
So
is,
that would explain it.
Yeah, I guess so.
So I'm glad we gave you the mic.
I mean, this is actually a very interesting point, right? I mean, the salary gap is a very interesting point here. And that actually solves the puzzle there.
So I think we're going to wrap it up. I want to thank first the panel, fantastic contributions and perspectives. Thank you again, Asia Society, for organizing this great evening, to all of you for the dialogue. And it is exactly that. We've got to keep having the dialogue, not to be put off by the limitations. Just keep talking, be brave, and get out, break the patterns. I think that's my conclusion of this evening, both in society and in organizations. So thank you so much. Have a good evening.